I'm 49.
49.
49.
Okay.
I'll be 50 next February.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. So we're exactly 20 years apart.
All right.
I'm not 20 years younger than you, John.
Are you in February as well?
I know I'm November, but I am 69.
All right.
And
Close
I will
enough.
be 70 in November.
All right.
I asked you that because you've been at this career in music now for quite a while.
Yeah.
And, you know, we have this idea of, you know, the rock star, the rock musician is this young guy. But there you are, you know, you're going to be 50 soon.
There's a lot of old rock stars out there these days.
Yeah. Actually, right, times have never been better for being an old rock star.
I think so. You look at the Stones and these guys. There's rock and roll's not that old, so I think...
Right.
It's it's only about as old as it's not much older than the Rolling Stones. So
Yes.
that the fact that I don't think you could have. I mean, Chuck Berry is he's still going, and that's about as old as you can get for a rock star.
How old
right?
is Chuck Berry now?
I don't know. I think he's like in his 80s.
Yeah.
Well,
that's nice to look forward to.
Yeah. So I guess in the old days, the Who sang about. Hope I die before I get old, but I don't think that applies
Why
anymore.
not get old first?
Well, right, why not get old first? I don't think I think they're a lot of counting on rock and roll maybe not lasting that long or something, but I think it's around to stay.
Things last, yeah. Well, it seems to me that it's that the fact that old musicians are still around is partly to do with the great importance of name recognition today.
Yeah, well, it takes a while to. I think it takes. There was an interesting statistic that our bass player Mike brought to us at about the 11-year mark of the band. The band's been going for 30 years, and we started in 1983. And he brought an article from somewhere that had a statistic that said something like 80% of all bands that start don't make it to the 4-year mark. Mm-hmm. And of the 20 that survive to the 4-year mark, 90-some% don't make it to the 10-year mark. So at the time he read this to us, we were at about the 11-year mark. So we figured we had the odds beat already just from showing up.
Yeah.
So I think name recognition largely comes from just showing up. I mean, if you just keep going out and you just stick around long enough, and people are at least bound to have heard of you. I mean, at this point, Phish has this kind of odd type of fame where the people that know us and really like the band, and the people that don't, at this point, have at least heard of us. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I think that's like a lot of time. I mean, most of the time, they've at least heard of us or something, like it rings a bell somewhere.
Yes, right.
So I think that's a lot of it, just showing up, which I don't think has anything to do with being good or anything.
Well, I'm sure it has something to do with being good, but it does have something to do with showing up as well. I think that's a good lesson for anybody who's listening who is maybe not as old as we are. That sticking with it and not giving it up is really important. Having a focus and staying with something for a while.
And I guess that would go for a number of any. I think I read someplace too. There was a quote I saw. There was the formula for success is consistency over time, and I think that is definitely true in any line of work or interest or anything. I think that's the old rock star thing, or the old musician thing. Another thing that comes to mind is that one of the very inspiring things in my life, and has been since I was in my early 30s, I read an interview. Well, at 3 separate times, I either heard or read interviews with Buddy Rich, Ella Fitzgerald, and Joe Pass, all who are musical heroes of mine. But Buddy Rich was the reason why many, many, many people even play the drums to begin with. It was like Ella Fitzgerald, of course, one of the great jazz singers of all time, and Joe Pass, one of the great jazz guitar players of all time. And each of these people, in these interviews that I either read or heard, separately, not talking to each other or anything like that, each of them interestingly marked their 50th year at around 50 that they were said something along the lines of, and they all said it a different way, but it essentially boiled down to, I think I'm really getting a handle on this now.
Yes.
I remember more specifically the Buddy Rich interview where there's a tape of his kind of whole career, and the interviewer says, well, is this getting harder? Is it getting easier? Do you feel, and right around 50, and he said, actually, I'm really starting to enjoy myself more than ever now because I've got a handle on this. I feel like I'm understanding. I don't have as much to prove.
Yes.
I feel like I have a, and along those lines, there was just a lot of, and the same thing that Joe Pass and Ella Fitzgerald. So it's right around 50. It was sort of like I'm still learning. I still feel like I have a lot of progress to make, and that the learning curve is still relatively steep. There's a whole lot to still learn, and I'm able to internalize it, and I'm still able to improve at a noticeable clip. But I don't have as much, but I feel I'm comfortable in my skin, and I feel like I don't have as much to prove. And part of it comes from having your name established, I think, that you kind of feel like you have a career, you have a fan base, you're not so worried about making a living at it. And that frees you up even more creatively to take more musical chances and more risks creatively. And because you don't feel like, well, geez, if I don't, if this record isn't successful, or if I go down this kind of weird road or something, I might lose people, and they might not come along with me, and then, I won't be able to put food on the table or something. I think as an artist, there's maybe that in the back of people's heads. But I think, when I heard those interviews, it seemed to me that was part of what was going on. They were established as artists, and they felt really good about the creative place that put them in. And they were really able to, they had a good handle on their instruments and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of agree. At 49, I feel like I can actually relate to that more. I feel like I'm in a really particularly fruitful creative period right now. It's almost like coming back around to when I was in my 20s or 30s, but I kind of know more. So, it's really,
Well, it's interesting. I asked that question. And then as you were talking, I was realizing, if you were a classical violinist, 49, nobody would think anything except that you were absolutely at the height of your career. But if you're a rock musician, there's a little, are you a musician or are you sort of, a teen sex idol? And so... I
am far from a teen sex idol. I can guarantee you I'm far more musician than teen sex idol.
Well, and I know that, and I know that you're really a very serious musician.
No, I'm just, so I'm not that I'm a serious musician. Yes, I'm just definitely not a teen sex idol.
Well, we're talking about name recognition, and it reminded me of, and maybe this is what's brought it home to me so much. A few years ago, we organized a concert and a CD, and I'll give you a copy of the CD when you go. Because we have 1,000 of them, because nobody wanted to buy them.
I know how that goes. I got a few records I'm involved with that are like that.
And it actually is an extremely nice CD, and it's like 20 tracks from 20 different local musicians. And we put together a concert at the Camden Opera House, and we had a beautiful poster and beautiful publicity for it, and yet very few people came. None of the people on that list is really has a name like that. And our culture, there was a time when there were a lot of local musicians. There were local baseball players, and Rockland had a professional baseball team. But now culture is so centralized. So a few lucky people are able really to benefit from that because they manage to be there at the center.
Right.
And so many other people have such a hard time making a living at all as artists, whether as musicians or in many other skills.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I definitely think that there has always been these different periods of social evolution, I guess, or maybe technological, or the different types of things that happen around the, what am I trying to say here? The different limitations that art has to live within at different periods of time. And some like, so when you say this, things have become so much more centralized, I'm not. I guess I would. The first thing that comes to my mind is that I feel like I could apply that to almost any era where it would seem that, like, for example, if you lived in the time before modern recording and the internet and the iPods and all that kind of stuff, it would seem to me that somebody like a Duke Ellington or a Count Basie might look at today and go, "Man, I wish we had that then." Because, we could, millions of people could find out about us really easily from one broadcast, But, they had to go out and really tour incessantly and to, really actually make their name for themselves, one person at a time, one audience at a time, which may be a few hundred or, at the height of their popularity, there may have still be, the majority of the world or even the nation at any given time might not have even known who they were. Whereas today, or like say by the 70s or so, when you had international television and all that kind of stuff, you could have the Beatles could go on and do All You Need Is Love, and the whole world could see that all at once and become aware of them in a sort of an explosive manner, so to the degree to where when the first day that they show up in the United States, it's like the floodgates open. You've already got, they're already completely popular, and the world, the whole country is in love with them over here before they even set foot on the ground, which could never have happened before, but then the downside, I think of what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's also that flood of information now where, you have all kinds of channels and Instagrams and YouTubes and all kinds of things where it's almost like such a deluge of information that people can't focus. And so, and there's this, there's that sort of immediate gratification consumer mentality where it's, here today and gone tomorrow, where I really like this band in this 5 minutes, but I'm on to the next YouTube video, and now I like this band, and now I like this band. So, whether or not a group or an artist of any type, musically or otherwise, has any staying power, I suppose, and how much the centralization or lack thereof affects that staying power, I don't know that I could pin a particular quantitative assessment on that.
Right,
I don't really like I could really go, I don't know, because I would imagine for some people it would be incredibly beneficial, but and that it might help them have staying power even when they're gone for a while.
Right.
But for others, it might cause you to disappear that much quicker.
Right.
So, but I think every God, I mean, I don't think that there's ever been a time in history where it was easy to make a living as an artist.
Well, I suppose there was a time when there were a lot of musicians who were, folk singers out on the street, barely surviving, barely getting enough to eat, and then a few musicians who made a decent living because they were working for the king or for Baron somebody or whatever, when music was mostly about, and art was mostly about having a, what is the word for it, patron. So I guess, we have to live in the era we're in.
You know what I think, though? I do think maybe there's some truth to the sense that the cream used to rise to the top more consistently. Whereas, like, back in the days of, the Renaissance even or something, if you were Michelangelo da Vinci, you were going to get hired by the people where someone was going to pay you to do that level of work. If you weren't that guy, they weren't going to bother with you. And I would say the same might have held true for the bands that toured around before recording and all that kind of stuff. I don't necessarily think anymore that large numbers of people coming to see you or loving you or anything really has anything to do anymore with how good you are. Mm-hmm. Or has less to do with it.
You started by saying that it was about just sticking to it, and it wasn't.
Well, that's true. I do. I think that there's a lot to endurance and sticking with it. I personally don't know whether I mean, when I look as an audience member at, like, one of my favorite artists was Frank Zappa. He never achieved the kind of fame that, let's say, Lady Gaga or Justin Bieber or Led Zeppelin or something, But I feel that he was just one of the most artists that ever existed, and but in his case, I feel like he was so good that despite the controversialness of some of what he did, it still pushed through. It still rose to the top. Whereas when I look at my own band, I can't. At Phish, I could never tell whether Phish is really. I feel like it's a great band. I love being part of it, and I love what I do. I mean, I'm talking as a guy who loves his job and wouldn't trade it for the world. But whether or not we are as good as the artists that I loved and admired, whether they were commercially successful or not, I will never know. And our popularity, is it because we're great, or is it because we just stuck around for 30 years? You know what I mean? So, and I think it's a mix of both, honestly. I think to some people we're the greatest band in the world, and to other people it's just too bad that we got as famous as we did, because we just don't deserve it. And and I think that both are right, and both are the result of our modern society and the way things are promoted and all that kind of stuff. Whereas I feel that if I was in Duke Ellington's band back in the 1930s, I would be darn sure that we were and that it was because we earned it. We were the top of the because there was no other way to account for it. You know what I mean?
Right. Whereas today, there's also, there's so much marketing too that's involved. Branding and so on.
Right. So you can't ever tell if it's just because that's what's available.
Really happening. Yeah. Well, and so many fans are less about really the music than about being in the right crowd, being, it can be a sort of conforming to something idea.
Oh, I think that's always been part of it, though, too. I mean, yes. I think music and art are part of people's way of forming an identity. I have read, there was another thing I read one time where it said, the music that you fall in love with when you're about 14 years old is probably the one set of music that you'll always love, because that's when you're forming so much of your own personal identity and the way you view yourself in the greater context of the world. And I do think, I know from my own experience that that's definitely true. The records and music that I loved then, I still love. And that's really was the first stuff that I became totally attached to, and I would still stand by today.
Right.
And the reasons why I liked it, Not that I haven't since then discovered a lot of other stuff that I feel just as...
Right.
But the first stuff that I felt married to, musically and artistically, and identified with, that it started then.
Well, that's true for me too. That's interesting, because when I was, in middle school, high school, the music on the radio at home, we were near New York City, and it was WQXR was the city station, and they played classical music, and I grew up listening to classical music.
Yeah.
I didn't hear any jazz until I was in college, and I got to like that, and I have a wider taste, but it's definitely classical music that stuck with me the most.
Well, and you're married to an extrame jazz aficionado.
Oh, that's true. She loves Joe Pass. You were saying Joe Pass. That's my wife, Keiko, who is the chef at Suzuki Sushi Bar, and she plays only jazz. And
it's always really good.
She has justified a rather significant part of the restaurant budget for music.
Yeah.
she gets CDs in the mail, practically every day, and she's listening. Is this a good one to play at Suzuki? So she's definitely into jazz, and I'm glad
And Dizzy Gillespie said that was the classical music of the future, which is true because I think it took all the melodic and harmonic developments of classical music, but added rhythm and added all that to it.
So you said the word that I wanted to get to next,
rhythm.
Which is rhythm. Yeah,
that was on your.
It's on there,
it's
right?
On the sheet.
And I was thinking of getting it at it this way first, which is we're talking about being 49. What about a drummer? As like there's some positions in baseball you could be older or whatever, require different skills.
Right.
What about being a drummer?
Yeah, that's interesting you ask. I definitely feel physically that would be the only place where I feel like I have to work a little harder to keep up with my ideas is in the physical department and keep I more religiously. I actually, when I was a kid, I never really focused on my rudiments probably the way I should have. But at some point in my early 30s, I had a friend that said, 0 to 35, you ride your youth for all it's worth, and 35 on, it's all about maintenance. And right around that period was when I started to feel like I was starting to maybe get some wrist and finger problems and stuff. And I had some lessons that with actually Joe Morello, who was one of the great jazz drummers, and I had the great privilege of having him give me some really great exercises to keep my wrists and fingers from ever developing any of these sort of carpal tunnel or things like that. And everything that he taught had to do with full range of motion and never having fatigue or stress in the motion of what you're doing. And I'm pretty religiously attentive to those exercises, and I have a pretty. In fact, right before I came here, I went through my hour-long warm-up ritual, and I stick with that off tour, pretty regularly. And yeah, there. I think for my instrument, there is definitely. I don't know what it's like for other instruments, but for mine, I definitely need to. I'm aware of the fact that I need to not only be doing those, sticking with the rudiments and all that kind of stuff, which I imagine if you were a guitar player, a flute player, or anything, you would have to do that for your fingers too and everything. But there's posture issues. There's so I when I'm in a regular. I'm kind of out of shape right now, but when I am in a regular exercise mode, I'm usually swimming laps. That's what I did as a kid. I was on a swim team, and so I continue to do that for exercise because I really feel like it helps my drumming a lot. It prevents me from having any joint issues, and it keeps my posture good, and those are definitely things you have to be conscious of for sure. And but when I have been doing my when I've been kind of staying on the horse and not having to push it real hard, but just kind of staying consistent over time, I find that I'm able to, whatever I can hear in my head, I'm able to get out to my hands and feet pretty efficiently still. But there are definitely some songs in our repertoire that we don't as a band we don't play at as high tempos as we used to. Partially because if we wanted to, we probably couldn't, and we might, or we could probably work really hard. It would take a great amount of effort to get back up to that tempo. But interestingly, the other side of that coin is if that was what you really wanted to do and you felt that it was necessary for the music to be good, I think we would. I think that what's happened, though, over time, and I feel like this is some of the stuff that some of my favorite musical artists have alluded to in their own experience, like Ella Fitzgerald and Joe Pass of the world, that having slower tempos for some of this stuff is the way it should have been probably originally, that the music breathes more, that you can hear it. When I listen to some versions of some songs like there's this one song, Rift. It's really got, the earlier versions of it had an incredible clip to it. And it's got this beautiful melody and this whole, there's all these voicings going on in the chords that, you know, when I listen back to the 93 versions of it, I mean, it's sort of smoking, you know, you're listening to it like, wow, this is, you know, really burning. But then I feel like there's so much more space in it. It's still at a decent tempo. It's just that it still has that same feel, but you can really hear the music going by now, and it's not like in a hurry to finish, you know. It's really a lot more musical, you know. So there's something to be said for, you know, whether it's because you can't or you shouldn't, there's something to be said for slowing the tempo down for some of these things. And rather than, I've been finding with some of this stuff that rather than be concerned that, you know, I can't play it as fast, or I'm actually kind of grateful that it's like, feel like we've been playing this for 25 years and we finally are starting to play it right, you know, and in a way that I'm enjoying more. So and I think that you tend to, now noticing that about some of the older material, newer material going forward, you know, you tend to kind of, there tends to be more of an attitude of letting this song breathe and allowing more space, you know, not having to play as gazillion notes. And when I think about one of my least favorite aspects of music, of the music that I haven't liked, it was the lack of space, really. It's just, you know, a gazillion notes going by. You know, after a while, it's just eye rolling, you know. It's like, oh my God, shut up already, you know. And you know, and I think that probably, you know, classical music is, so much of it is about, you know, the space. I mean, there's certainly some fiery stuff in classical music, but you know, you want to hear the voicings, you know, you want to hear all that stuff.
Absolutely. Well, you know, in a way, what you're saying is, you know, you get older, you might get a little slower, but you get wiser, too.
I think I do. It's definitely and I think I like the trade-off. I enjoy the trade-off.
Well, I can tell you at 69 that I'm still enjoying it very much, and you know, it's different. That's all. But it's you learn as you go along, and it's neat to and it, you know, it's just nice to have more behind you, and also you have less to lose in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I have gone through several cycles now of knowing that I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life in some capacity or another, whether anyone's listening or not. When Phish broke up in 2004, for about 4.5 years, about 2 years into it, there was really no expectation at all that we were ever going to get back together as a group. And I actually did put my drumsticks down for about 1.5 years, which was the longest I ever did. But I was really burnt out. I mean, we had been going 21 years straight and hard. And I, you know, we just sort of hit a wall, and it was just good to go home, be with my family, learn some other skills, and hike in the woods a lot, and you know, learn how to make compost and, you know, things like that. And I had some old leftover, just some ideas, rhythmic ideas and stuff that I had always kind of wanted to apply to a drum set that had been rolling around in my head for a long time. And you know, the problem when you're touring a lot and when you're younger and you're touring all the time is that there's less time to rehearse and develop new things. You know, you get home from the road, and you might only be home for a month or two before you're out on the road. I was on the road like 8-9 months of the year, so you'd be kind of burnt. You just want to rest and relax and sleep, and so it was hard to kind of get home and really buckle down and get right to work on some new idea. So whereas the material we had really got a lot of work out playing on the road, newer material over time started to suffer, or the development of other ideas started to, you know, there's always trade-off and everything. So when the band stopped, I had all this breathing space, and the first thing I did was just stop for a while, and then these ideas, and there's this exercise that developed this piece of drum music. It's about a 7-minute thing, but I had always wanted to do this one thing, and it took me a couple of weeks actually to write it out, and then really took me like 2 months to actually get good at playing it. And it had turned out that it is no more than a glorified warm-up exercise. It kind of has no musical value, but it's this thing that I really wanted to do. And I had, at the time, I was so into it, and this was about 2 years into our breakup, so it was like around '06. It was right around when we moved up here. And I was so into it, and it was really a good feeling to get back in touch with that I felt like I did when I was a little kid in my parents' basement and playing the drums because I just liked doing it. And I was back to square one, doing it purely for its own sake, with no real thought of how this was going to be applied in the larger world, And that made it, when Phish did get back together, it made it, I felt much better about that because I knew that although it was great to have a chance to be back in Phish again and be able to develop new things, I knew that Phish or no Phish, I was going to be doing this, and I enjoyed it for its own sake. So why the heck not go out and make a good living doing it again too? So it's wonderful. I can actually make money from it, support my family with it again. But I think it's important to know that as an artist, it's good to know that you don't have a choice, sort of, that you're going to do this whether someone pays you to do it or not. When you're a kid doing it, that's not a thought. But after you've made a living at it for a while, if that goes away, I guess there was a period before the band broke up where I was feeling burnt out and wondering, am I just doing this because this is what makes me a living now? And am I, you start to question, do I enjoy this for its own sake anymore? And that question was answered for me, with no real way to make a living at it in sight. And so that's kind of why I feel that's partially why I'm in this really great spot creatively now. Because,
sometimes I read about musicians who get a name for themselves and then try to change what they're doing. They sort of, the fans want them to sing the same things over and over again. I'm thinking of this sad story of Phil Oakes. I don't know if you remember that.
I know his name, and I've heard him, but
he was a folk singer. He made a big name for himself, but then he wanted to do something different, and nobody wanted to hear it. And so there is this pressure once you have a name and you have fans to keep doing the stuff that they love, that they know. I listened to a live concert, and the band plays a song that that they've had recording of for a long time or whatever, and the audience is really, really psyched. So there must be pressure to repeat the same things.
We, of maybe any band in the world right now, are singularly blessed in exactly the opposite of what you just said. We have literally no pressure at all to play any particular piece of material. I mean, perhaps if we didn't want to be a rock band and we suddenly wanted to go and become an acoustic jazz band, that would be maybe an issue. But so long as we enjoy being a rock band that plays electric music and sings and does what we've been doing for the last 30 years in the form that we do it, we have no hits. We've had no hit singles. We've had no hit albums. We've had some stuff on the radio. We've had some. We may continue to have some things that float out there. There's definitely certain songs that people like of ours that may become more popular than others. But our audience actually, one of the aspects of what we do that is viewed by not just the band, but I feel pretty confident that it's viewed by the audience as well, is that it's a kind of a, you don't know necessarily what we're going to play, and that's part of what people like about it. I mean, we don't know. We we don't go on stage with a song list anymore, Like we have a master song list of about 300 tunes. And that changes from tour to tour as you develop new material. I mean, we just put out a new album, so there's about 10 new songs now that are going to get thrown into that pile. And you know, th- we are under no pressure at all to play any particular thing from the entire history of our career,
Right. Well, that's
which is
very
just
fortunate. That's
unbelievably
wonderful. Yeah.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
no, I
great.
mean, I think that might be one of the reasons why, as a band, we've been able to continue for 30 years and been able to and be in a place now where we're kind of enjoying it more than ever, or certainly as much as we ever have. Because there isn't that pressure, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's definitely a huge reason why.
Well, I do want to tell people who are listening that they are listening to WRFR, that I'm Joe Steinberger, which I think I didn't even mention, and
You didn't,
and
you
I'm
actually
talking to John Fishman, and we're gonna come back in a minute. We're gonna take a little break. I hope that I'm going to be able to play something on here. Let's see what happens, and then we're going to come back, and I'm going to try to take phone calls when we come back and see what happens.
Okay.
Okay. So let's see if I pull this thing down. So we are back. I'm Joe Steinberger. This is WRFR, and we're talking with John Fishman, and we will take calls. I will try anyway. We were just listening to a little Cimarosa. This is written around 1800, and John and I were talking about that classical music. You haven't listened to much classical
Not
music.
a lot. Nope. I definitely was raised on rock and roll, and that's where I've been most active. And then I developed a great love for jazz along the way because rhythmically it was the more jazz and Afro-Cuban rhythms are, I guess, for lack of a better term, the most highly advanced. I suppose that it's the most challenging stuff to learn on a kit, so it was kind of, and there's a great, there's this artist in New York named James Blood Ulmer who's this kind of avant-garde jazz guitar player, electric rock, very very unusual musician, real eclectic, but he has this song jazz is the teacher, funk is the preacher, and one without the other, you have nothing but the blues. Mm-hmm. And I do think there's some truth to that, that jazz music for me has been a real educator, and it's the most challenging type of, form to play. I remember when I was younger, when I was first learning rock drumming, there's the level of independence required to play rock drumming is significantly easier, the independence between your limbs, than once you introduce the jazz ride, which is more an irregular pattern, you are, the other limbs are forced to kind of, the syncopation needed to, and the independence between the limbs is just sort of like a whole nother level. And then when you start adding other types of rides like Afro-Cuban rhythms, din 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 din, things like that, it just keeps going in layers and layers and layers. So if you can get, as a drummer, if you can start to really internalize some of those things, and then it raises your ceiling and gives you a lot more of a vocabulary with which to work in any musical improvisational context, whether it's rock or otherwise. But I think for people that play, harmony and melody and chord instruments too, I mean, we were just saying it kind of all paths sort of lead to classical.
But I can see that if you're a drummer, I mean, the tradition in classical music is not much about drumming. In fact,
no, it's like what's missing from.
Right.
I mean, although there is some pretty cool classical percussion. I mean, the percussion sections. There's definitely, like or marimbas and glockenspiels and a lot of the melodic instruments, but they are drum type instruments as well. But yeah, generally speaking, as far as the drum kit is concerned, it didn't exist.
So it's African music really, which is the origin of it.
Oh, for sure.
Have you listened to much primitive recordings, anthropological recordings?
Not a ton of that particular type of recording, but I've pretty extensive long periods of listening to some of the artists that came out of that were getting a lot of exposure in and it's funny, there's a real resurgence of it now, like the Ethiopia 70s recordings, and King Sunny Ade and Fela Kuti and Oboadi, and a lot of these people that come from long their particular art form is deeply rooted in old African rhythmic traditions. But around the 60s and 70s, they started to get exposed to the modern recorded world, and there were some studios set up over in Africa and stuff. And actually, I just saw this film on Ginger Baker, who was the original drummer for Cream, that he actually did a lot to open up the Western sort of European and American market knowledge to what was going on musically in Africa, and where that was rooted. But yeah, the anthropological stuff though that I've heard, that stuff is crazy. I mean, it is just so many layers of interconnected, like simple patterns interconnected into this almost seemingly cacophonic thing, but it's real repetitive when you really listen to it. It might be like 10, 15 people playing different patterns on different drums, and the drums are tonally similar enough that it can be confusing to hear them, sort of separate them out. But when you listen, you kind of let your head sort of float in that air and just not try to analyze it, but you do start to hear these long, cyclical, repetitive things that are definitely intentional, and there are definitely cycles to them, like where like 9 or 10 different things are sort of all going along, and then they kind of all meet up in one place, and then it is kind of going along, you sort of lose it for a while, and then you hear that place, that same sort of meeting place occur again, and you're like, oh wait, there's that, and then you start to little by little get a grip on the other parts in that cycle, and these cycles are like, and it's the same in like Indian music, Indian traditions, and ragas and different types of like tabla drumming, that there's long like the rhythm patterns aren't 4, 5, 8 bar things. It's like it's language based, so a lot of it is whereas over here we might count 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 or there'd be so many bars of this and so many bars of that. There it's like if in language-based rhythms, it's like having to memorize a passage in a dialogue in a play. Like if you're in a Shakespeare play and you have to memorize the monologue of some character. That's what it is. It's like you're memorizing this whole paragraph of rhythmic thought, and that in itself is a cycle.
Yes.
And within that, it isn't repeating, every 4/8 beats the same way. It's just longer, and that stuff is really intense. And when you start to try to imply that to the drum set, it gets really interesting. But
that sounds like fun. I want to mention, John, to callers. We don't have anybody picking up the phone except me here in the studio. And I want to wait for John to finish what he's saying.
I might not let a caller get in a word address.
You just have to let it ring, and then when we get
if I see it ring, should I?
When he stops talking, we'll pick up the phone. But if somebody was calling right now, I'd pick it up. But nobody's calling at this moment. But we have had a number of calls. But I didn't want to interrupt. I think that John has said that he could stay until almost 4:30, so we can go over the hour. We'll take a break for station ID in 5 minutes, but then we'll okay. And we do have a call, so let's see if this works. Hello, you're on the air, WRFR. You're on the air. Oh, I gotta push this. Hello, WRFR. You're on the air. Are you there? Oh, goodness.
Does that just answer it?
I didn't. I got to try that again. Sorry. Next time, I got to push the button. Okay.
There you go.
Oh, okay. We're going to try this one. Okay. I'm going to push this. I'm going to push this button. I'm going to push this up. Are you there?
Yes, hello.
Hi, this is WRFR. You're on the air. I have to say that for the FCC, just in case you're calling to sell us a vacuum cleaner or something. Okay. Yes. Thank you for calling.
I have a question for John.
All right.
Do you feel that in the more recent years that your song placements in a set have become a little bit stale?
He's tough. I've been softballing.
Solid question. Well, let's see. I think there are some songs that seem to, like I can think of some songs specifically that seem to have occupied certain places. Like I know we play Harry Hood, and it tends to be toward the ends of gigs. It seems to have occupied that space more often than not. And think of other songs. I think of songs like AC/DC Bag, or that seemed to be more like at the beginning of gigs. But I don't, other than sort of things that we tend to open with or close with. And when I say that, I don't even mean it in a strict sense, like that's what we always open with. But those two songs seem to come to mind right away for me. That one tends to happen at the beginning, one tends to happen more at the end. But I don't know that I feel that way. It seems you might feel that way more about the rest of the song list, but I can't really think specifically about other ones that seem to always, are placed in predictable places as much. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I think of songs like, when I ask the question, I'm thinking along the lines of Mama Dance or Divided Sky, that always seem to come up around the fourth song of the first set.
Oh yeah, Mama Dance would be another one that tends to happen toward the earlier parts of gigs. Divided Sky would be another one. Yeah, I don't know why. But they don't. I mean, I don't think it's predictable in the sense that the placement of certain songs like that. That's true. But I don't know that they if you hear Mama Dance, for example, doesn't necessarily, I don't feel like it's paired with other songs. You know what I mean? Like if you hear that, you're not going to necessarily know what the next 3 or 4 songs are going to be. But yeah, I mean, I guess maybe, I don't know if that's an unavoidable thing or.
Do you guys ever sit there before a show and you just say, hey, let's take this song that we always play in the first set and let's jam it out for 20 minutes in set 2 today?
We have had that, yes. Not often, but there are times where we'll come off the stage and go, oh, whoa, that was a second set MoMA dance or something. I mean, we're definitely not oblivious to the fact that certain songs tend to happen more often than not in certain places, and when they do happen in really drastically different places, we notice it too, and we kind of make fun of ourselves when it does happen.
Gentlemen, we got just a few seconds before the hour, and the way this radio station's set up, we have to be there.
Okay,
so,
all right.
So I'm looking at the clock. Any last comment from our caller?
No, just thank you for taking my call. Thank you for the time, John.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much for calling. All right, so I have to learn how to push all the buttons here, and we're going to it takes about 4 minutes to do our station break, so we'll all get a little break, and then we'll come back and we'll continue our discussion and maybe take another call or two. So, okay, here goes nothing. I'm going to try to do this right.
Hello, this is Tisha Huffnagel, voice behind the community calendar of WRFR in Rockland, and you're listening to WRFR LP 93.3 FM in Rockland, broadcasting also on W257BI 99.3 FM in Camden. We also stream on the web at WRFR.org, and at WRFR, we are all volunteers. We invite you to join us in giving voice to the life and creativity of our Rockland-Camden area. WRFR is sponsored by over 80 local businesses, and each hour we like to thank 4 of these sponsors. Please do note who they are and let them know that you appreciate their support for your local community radio station.
Offshore restaurant located on Route 1 in Rockport, offering fresh local seafood and an extensive salad bar. Open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner Tuesday through Sunday. They can be reached at 207-594-6804. The Offshore Restaurant is proud to be a supporting member of WRFR.
The Owl's Head Transportation Museum, open 7 days a week. The museum features a working collection of antique cars, planes, motorcycles, and more. The museum also hosts special events throughout the year. Visitors under 18 are free. On the web at owlshead.org.
PDQ Photo Rockland reminds you that a hard drive full of memories can crash and take your photos with it. PDQ can safeguard your digital pictures by the simple act of printing them. Located on Main Street in Rockland since 1959, PDQ stands for Prints Done Quickly.
Penn Bay Healthcare is proud to partner with WRFR Community Radio. With locations throughout Midcoast, Maine, wellness is within your reach. To find a doctor, 596-8200 or online, pennbayhealthcare.org. Penn Bay and WRFR, we're better together.
And we thank you for listening. If you'd like to learn more about your local radio station, give us a call at 594-0721 or log into our website at wrfr.org.
All right, and if anyone who's listening is really good at swatting flies, we need help because we got one here in the studio. I'm Joe Steinberger. This is WRFR. We're talking with John Fishman, and we've got a call, so let me take that call right now if it's still there. Okay. Hello, are you there? This is WRFR. You're on the air.
Oh, I thank you. I just had a question. I was wondering if John could elaborate a little bit on what the inspiration for his drum part for Fuego was, especially the B section where it's like Clyde Stubblefield on speed. It's really awesome. So yeah, I would just be interested to hear his thoughts on that.
All right, for the guys recording in the studio here, I'm going to just sort of paraphrase that question. The caller was asking what my inspiration for the drum part for the song Fuego, which is the title track of our new album, was, and especially the middle part, the fast part in the middle. So, well, Clyde Stubblefield is certainly a huge influence there. It's certainly big inspiration. I don't know that when we recorded it, actually when we were working on that song, that fast section didn't exist in the initial writing part of it. When we started to work with Bob Ezrin in forming the songs more, Bob said when we were playing this for him, he said at that point, he said it needs something here. It needs to change the tempo. So he just sort of threw that out as a suggestion. And as soon as he threw that out as a suggestion, I just started playing that kind of fast beat. Now Clyde Stubblefield, certainly is a big influence on my life. And also, for those kinds of grooves, those sort of fast, dribbly types of things, there's two guys in particular that I think really influenced me early on. One was Phil Collins. I don't care what anyone says about him. The guy was one of the great drummers of all time. And whether you liked his ballad singing or not, it doesn't matter. He was a smoking drummer. And one of my favorite influences. And the other guy that did really great kind of a lot of subtle little, I call dribbly stuff on the snares, between the snare and the ride and everything, that kind of fast stuff was Richie Hayward, the drummer for Little Feat. So those guys were two big influences. But Clyde, in terms of the fast, the funk stuff, for sure, James Brown's music, huge. But the beat itself is made up of this thing that I was working on, which is kind of a seesaw motion of playing triplets, going like right hand, left hand, foot, and then left hand, right hand, foot. So it's kind of back and forth. Anyway, if you did that on a kit, you could sort of generally. And once you speed that up, that's basically what I'm doing there. Is it's kind of all my limbs are moving slow, but they're syncopated, so it sounds like something is really fast happening, but it's actually pretty slow. It's actually a pretty relaxed sort of thing to do. So yes, it was taking those influences of those people, but then applying that to this particular thing I've been working on, and that's what that beat is. And the beginning part is, the very beginning, slow part, is actually 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover played really loosely and kind of wrong and slowed down. It's not exactly 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, but I would have never played that beat there if I hadn't actually just learned 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover not that long ago. So there you go.
So does that answer your question?
Oh, absolutely. And those cowbell hits at the beginning are so tasty.
Well, it's like I love that too. That's actually my favorite part of the drumming and the whole thing is just the very beginning. I love that. I'll play that song. Like, that's one of those songs I would play every day for the rest of my life if the rest of the band allowed it. But we'll see what happens. But yeah, no, I really like that. I'm glad you like it. Thanks.
Yeah, right on, man. Look forward to seeing you this summer.
All right.
Great. Thanks a lot for calling. Okay. Yeah, I'm starting to learn how to push the buttons. Should we take another call?
Sure.
We got one here. Okay. Hello, WRFR. You're on the air.
Hi, how's it going? Are you still doing that interview with John Fishman?
We are.
Yep, I'm here.
He's here, ready to answer a question.
Very cool, very cool. I was just wondering if you ever thought about starting a hotline like Mike Gordon does.
Oh, does Mike have what's Mike's thing? It's just a message though, right?
Yeah, it's just a message, but Mike listens to all of them, and sometimes he'll respond on the voicemail. But the tricky thing is, I've never actually gotten through to the voice message. One time I met him and he deleted the message for me, and I still couldn't get through. I was thinking like if another member, because I'd really like to hear what Fishman had to say, and if another member had it, maybe it'd make more opportunities just to.
So when you call Mike's hotline, I'm asking you. So when you call Mike's hotline, like what do you hear? There's just a message from him, or is it something where he's asking you a question, or what do you hear?
Sometimes it's very serious. Like sometimes he has like something like very serious to say. Sometimes you can't really make much sense out of what he's saying, and other times. sometimes he gets upset too because people hack it once in a while, and like sometimes you just feel like other people who hack the hotline.
That is so great. You know, I gotta say this about I don't know that I personally will ever have a hotline because I am not. I mean, if I did, you'd get mad at me because I would probably forget to check it. I have enough trouble checking my own voicemails. Our phone at home, the voicemail on our phone at home constantly fills up, and we'll have other people tell us weeks after it's filled up, hey, your mailbox is full, erase your messages so I can call your house or whatever. And so I have 5 kids, and I can't have enough time. I would never be able to pay attention to it. Not that I wouldn't want to. I just probably know better than to start something like that. But I will say, I am so glad that Mike has a hotline because Mike Gordon is.
Oh, me too.
He is literally the funniest person I have ever known. And a lot of times people would say to us, "Well, what's a reason that Phish has been together for 30 years?" And I say it's because it's 3 people looking at one guy going, who the hell is that? He's a really creative, incredibly inspiring character, and he's really, really funny, and he's an endless mystery. So keep calling his hotline. I'm sure he'll get through eventually.
Hey, and thank you very much for calling us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Nice talking, John.
All right, take care.
Take care. So, well, time is flying. Time is flying. Well, that's great. It's very. So you've had these. What is there something? Oh, wait a minute. I pushed the wrong button there. Sorry.
Oh,
yeah. Sorry. Instead of hanging up one, I picked up the other. Okay.
No, you pick it up.
So let's take one more. What the heck? So, hello, you're on WRFR live.
Hi, John, how are you?
Good, how you doing?
Pretty good. Quick question. I don't know if you remember, back in the day, Mike's song had that, second jam at the end after, the first part, and then Trey hits the power chord where the song ends now. And it's been about 15 years since that. What happened to that?
Power chord with that song. You mean... Are you talking about the Weekapaw groove?
No, I'm saying in Mike's itself. Back the way it was done, mid-'90s, was you would play the song, and then there was that, the same jam that the song has now, and then Trey would hit those chords, the ones that end the song now, but then the jam would go on. There would be a second jam after that. And that was how it was done all the way in the mid-'90s. The last one was 98, and that just never happens anymore. I was wondering what happened to that.
I'm going to venture a guess here. I think what happened was, you may be raising a very interesting thing that happens, I think, sometimes in music. We may have, as a group, collectively, I don't ever, it's so interesting. That makes me want to go back and listen to something, our version of it from 95 or something. So I don't actually even remember the jam you're talking about, which is, I don't know if that's good or bad. But B, I also don't remember ever having a conversation where we said, that's one jam too many, let's just go to this other section here. I think, this is what I think happened. I think there was some night where we played Mike's song, and for whatever reason, we just never played that second jam that you're talking about. And it just remained that way forevermore for whatever reason. I can't remember back, in '98. I don't remember whether. I don't remember it being something that we specifically took note of. But it could have been something that happened so quickly where we went, wow, that was way better without that thing. Let's just do it that way from now on. And then we just made that decision right there on the spot and just did it. And so, because it was never more than a quick discussion like that, I'm not even remembering the jam you're talking about.
Yeah, no, that's interesting.
That's my honest answer.
Yeah,
but now I'm going to go listen and try to find one and see what you're talking about.
We have connoisseurs calling us in.
I know.
Hey, I have a question for a caller. I have a question for you. Are you calling while driving in your car?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay, because I hear cars going by. I thought, I should warn you, that's very dangerous.
In an office, so I'll always make sure not to do that.
Okay, good. Thank you very much for your call.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. So, and I pushed that button. Yes, I think that's right this time.
All right.
So, well, I'm not gonna take any more calls. Because I want to have the last questions here for John Fishman.
That was interesting. I like that. I don't think I've ever done that before.
What? Taking phone calls?
No, I don't think I've ever taken.
Really? Well, should we take one more? I mean, there is somebody. All right. We'll take one more call. Hello, WRFR. You're on the air.
Hey, Fish. What's going on, man?
How you doing?
Good. Hey, I had a quick question. You could talk a little bit about the evolution of the rhythm section in the band. It seemed like in the beginning everyone was kind of chasing Trey, and now you and Mike have really had more of a foundation in the group itself.
I can definitely talk about that. That's, okay, so this is a great thing about our fan base, what I was talking about before. People are listening, you can't get away with anything, and I think that's good. So, because I listen that way to music as well. I listen pretty intently to the details of it. So I can say, as a drummer, it's really funny. I was always, so when I was a kid, when I was like 14 or whatever, falling in love with Jimi Hendrix and stuff, I used to stand in front of my speakers and air guitar. I kind of a closet guitar player. I would even air bass, anything but air drum. I didn't actually have a drum set where my stereo was. My stereo was up in my bedroom, and I'd put on the headphones, I'd blast, Hendrix and stuff, and then I would get all excited, and I'd go down into the basement, and I would play drums with these guitar solos, singing the guitar solos back to myself in my head. I'd be sort of improvising, and I'd be playing the drum part on the record. There was this one piece of music on a Zappa record on Chic Your Booty. It's called Rat Tamago. It's like a minute and a half long or something. It was one of my favorite things. I used to go home after school and get all juiced up on that and run downstairs and play Rat Tamago with the guitar part going through my head. And I could probably almost sing Rat Tamago like today. But I couldn't sing you the drum part, but I could probably sing the guitar part. At any rate, so I was always really melody oriented that way. And so I think when Trey and I first met, I sort of was naturally, his guitar playing was so original sounding, and it was just something we had very common influences, and so it was almost like you could finish each other's thoughts, and I think that naturally as a drummer I gravitated more toward what Trey was playing, and the kind of road that was going down, and the road and trying to sort of follow that and play in and out of that, because. And he's also a drummer, so we thought a lot alike rhythmically. But I also was really turned on by what was happening in the guitar part. As I matured as a musician, I started to actually embrace the role of my instrument a little bit more and get a grip on the notion that, I'm kind of am supposed to be, in the engine room a little bit, driving the boat and keeping the beat and pushing and pulling things forward, but there is an element of that isn't. I shouldn't be always approximating the melody and always following the melody. But my personal evolution went to the guitar first, and then Page, when he came along, he was kind of the new guy in the band, and so there was a concerted effort on all of our part to musically pay attention to Page because we wanted to embrace him. We wanted him to feel comfortable. We wanted him to feel like a member of the band. He was a little uneasy, I think, being the new guy, so we wanted him to feel welcome. And so I was very consciously listening to Page. And I went to this one concert with the Wynton Marsalis group, and Jeff Tane Watts was the drummer at the time, and Kenny Kirkland was the piano player. And I noticed throughout the night, this changed my life this night, Jeff Watts' snare drum hand, his left hand, was basically playing almost, his snare drum was playing along with Kenny Kirkland's rhythm hand, his left hand, it was playing the big chords, so your right hand is kind of the melody hand in the piano, and the left hand is going dong, 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 playing along these. And Jeff Watts' snare drum was right there with that left hand on the piano. And so I became really conscious of that, and I started to really try to latch on with just the snare drum or just one limb of what I was doing. I try to really stick with Page, and that was more where I was focusing for a while. And that, so when Trey would kind of take off. I didn't always follow him. I would get more intently focused on Page. Then after about 20 years of being in this band, I started to go, oh, hey, drums and bass. And I'm starting like really, so I'm a very backwards drummer. I came at drumming very melodically and then got into this sort of rhythmic and arrhythmic parts of like the piano and the piano's role in rhythm, and then started actually getting into the foundation of the rhythmic aspect of my instrument and really cognizantly focusing on what was going on in bassland. And there you go. It's a great question, and that's actually been my personal evolution. So now I have gotten to a point where I don't hear any particular instrument anymore as what I'm following. I actually kind of hear the whole band as a singular entity. So not myself, but when I hear Mike and Trey and Paige playing, and this goes for any group of people that I sit down with. If I am going to sit down with a group of people and play music, what I try to do is I try to hear what the other musicians are doing collectively as a single thing. And so, as a result, certain parts of it might jump out at one moment to another. The bass player might really be saying something very strong, making a strong statement, and I would gravitate to that part of it, but then some other strong statement might come from another place, and so my brain would go there, and I tend to let my ears sort of follow that process. The difference being that in Phish, we are so, as a group, conscious of that listening, the importance of that listening skill, listening to yourself last and the collective group as a singular thing to respond to, that it's very different than if I go to a jam session at a house. The other people that I'm playing with aren't necessarily aware in the same way of like we are going to get together as a group and sort of really connect as a group in the same way. Because as Phish, we've had so many rehearsals and discussions and things about what we're trying to do up there, and there's a general attitude of we listen so intently to the group. If anyone falls out of the boat, the immediate thing is, to simplify and reach out and get them back in the boat, kind of a thing. We don't ever drift apart. We're trying to stay a cohesive unit no matter which way things twist and turn. And so when I say that, I'm hearing Mike and Trey and Paige and what they're doing as sort of a singular thing now. That works because I know they are listening in the same way. They are listening to the other three guys as a singular thing as well, and very consciously so. So that's it.
Okay. Did that answer your question?
It did. Thank you very much. You guys sound great. I appreciate it, Phish. And I have to apologize on behalf of Fantasy Tour for all the stupid questions that you might face today. So, thank you.
Oh, yeah. I don't, as a rule, I kind of don't. My wife looks at that every once in a while, but I don't. I kind of can't. It doesn't do me any good.
I don't blame you.
Nothing personal. I would if it was constructive. But.
Hey, thanks for the call.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. All right, let's take another one. We got just time for that. All right, I'm going to hang up there, pick up here. Hello, WRFR, you're on the air. Well, no, this one I missed somehow. Maybe they just gave up just a sec. Did you get that fly?
It was a mosquito.
Oh, well, better.
I got it.
That's even better. Oh, there he is. No, he didn't. He's still alive. Oh, well. This is it. This is radio in Maine and the end of June. All right, now that phone is ringing again. I'm gonna try that again. Hello, WRFR, you're on the air.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Yes.
Hey, Phish, love the new album and wanted to hear more about the songwriting process. I know you guys did a lot of collaborative tunes on this album, which was just the four of you. No lyrics from Tom or anything like that. And I wanted to hear a bit about you, how you guys worked with Bob Ezrin and what he brought to the band, to the table.
Great, thank you. That's an awesome question. I'm glad you like the album. I loved the process. I really like the results. I can't wait to make more albums. We're kind of in this good, creative period. And so the process was really, it was really great. Trey has the place called the Barn up in Vermont. We met there on several weekends starting back in March of 2013, and we started to 1 weekend in March, 2 weekends in April, 2 or 3 weekends in May, a weekend in June, and we were building up. And like when I say weekend, I mean like maybe 3-4 days of work, and we were just. There was all kinds. There was a collective writing process for all of those sessions up until I think maybe around the last couple in May and June. Trey and Mike and Paige and myself brought to the table whatever tunes we kind of had. I had this one tune. It got axed, but I had one song that I like write one song a year or something. But I had one song that I brought to the table. Trey had 4 or 5 or 6 or 7. Mike had 3 or 4. And Paige had a couple. But up until that point, it was all just collective. So how that's the material we originally got the collective stuff from. Mike, interestingly, had recorded years ago in 1993. I think he did this for several tours, but he had made notes on this tour in '93 about jams that he liked from particular concerts or particular songs, and he had made notes of them. And what he had done was gone home and compiled. I don't know if he did this right before we started working on this album or if he did it years ago, but at some point he compiled a tape of these jams that he had made notes of in his notebook. So we finished the tour, and he went and got his notebook and went to our archivist and said, okay, give me a tape with these jams on it. So then he culled through those jams and picked his favorite hour and a half of them, brought them to band practice, and we listened back to these jams. And where there was like a little snippet of something that we liked, we would stop the tape and actually learn it. So let's say for example, the beginning of Fuego, bum bum ba da ba dum 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 dum, right? That was a little tiny thing that happened in some jam in 1993, let's say. And we'd say, oh, that sounds cool. That's cool. That's a cool little thing, we arrived at there. So we'd learn that. Everybody would actually learn. My drum part there is, like I said to the other caller, my drum part isn't what I played on that tape, but or that riff, ba bum bum ba bum 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 bum. That thing was from one of these jams, and so at any rate, so we took these things, we learned these little snippets, and then we would jam on those, and we would let those sort of grow into something, and if we got anything out of it that we liked, we'd have it as like an A section, and we'd say, okay, now we're going to write some lyrics for just this piece of this chunk. And there was this writing exercise that Mike had as well that he came up with, that he had gotten, I think, from Gillian Welch or something. He read about a certain type of lyric generating exercise. You take like a theme and you write about it. It's a very narrow theme, and you write about it. Like the theme could be a mud puddle. And for 5 minutes exactly, you're going to write about a mud puddle. And everyone writes in their notebook about a mud puddle, whatever comes to mind, for 5 minutes. Then you take your 4 notebooks and you look at and you go over them, and everybody, as a group, you extract the statements or sentences or words out of these things that you liked, and then you compile those, and then you see if that starts to form a story. So that's just like one. Those are just 2 examples of things that we did as collective songwriting things. There were a whole bunch of others, but it would take too long to go through all of them. So at any rate, so we did that. Then later in the process, songs were actually put on the table. And then when we got together with Bob Ezrin, he said, we met him in Atlanta, Georgia on the tour, in the summer tour, and he said, okay, when I come up there in September, I want 25 songs on the songboard, and I don't want to know who wrote any of them. Those were his 2 things he wanted. He wanted 25 songs, and he wanted no knowledge of who wrote what. And he got up there, listened down to the 25 demos that we had, and he had a rating system. He if it got 4 stars, it was on the album. If it got 3 stars, it was just about on the album, but it needed something. If it had 2 stars, it was salvageable for parts. If it had 1 star, it was immediately jettisoned. Unfortunately, my song was in the immediately jettisoned pile, but that's to be expected. So anyway, so then that immediately culled things down to about 12 or 13 songs. And then we salvaged parts and did all this kind of stuff. And Bob was totally instrumental. At that point in the game, we had decided we were going to debut this album for Halloween. And so now we had a fire lit under our ass. There's a great saying that Duke Ellington, that Trey brought to the band practice one time when we were contemplating getting back together as a band. There was all kinds of discussions about when and where and all this kind of stuff. And Trey said, look, we can ideas. Duke Ellington's saying is, ideas are a dime a dozen. Give me a deadline. And so, this was a deadline now. Now we gave ourselves a deadline. And now we had to produce something. And Bob completely, without him, we would not have been able to focus and hone in on this material as efficiently as we did. And he really is a whipcracker, but in the best sense. He just was able to make us focus on this, and everything really coalesced. He was very organized in what needed to be accomplished each day, the kind of pace we needed to keep. We have to address 3 or 4 songs a day, and this, and was very intent on having a workable demo when we left for the fall tour. And so then when we went on the fall tour, we basically had the album. Everything wasn't totally worked out at that point, but the plan was to, at every night at sound check or backstage, we were going to rehearse 2 or 3 of the songs for the 2 weeks leading up on the road, starting October 17th and culminating on October 31st with the performance of the album. And then on November 4th, we were in Nashville in the studio, and we hit record, and we did all the basic tracks in 4 days. And there was and I left. I had to get out of there because my wife was due with our 5th child on November 22nd. Freddie was born. So I was really under the gun. So we got the basic tracks done, and then those guys stayed for a few more days and did some overdubs and stuff. But that's it. That's the process. Bob Ezrin is the most knowledgeable musically that we've ever worked with, I think. He really speaks the same language as musicians. He's a classically trained piano player, so he, chords and scales and ideas and musical ideas he was really great with, as well as having all of the production and engineering skills, and so yeah, he was awesome. I love working with him. I'd do the next 10 albums with him.
Hey, thanks so much for calling.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
So I gotta go.
Yeah, okay.
I was thinking I wouldn't be surprised if that phone call was my wife.
Yeah, right. Okay, so we're going to let John Fishman go. Thank you, John, so much for joining us. It was a great pleasure to have you on
I'm
WRFR.
sorry that you didn't get the last questions in, John.
Well, it's all right. Back. No, it was great. It was really great, and you got a chance to talk a bit about the creative process, and I think that was really great to hear. I really appreciated that.
Good questions.
So I thank everyone. I want to thank everyone for listening, and who knows? Maybe we'll be back sometime.
I would love to come back. I would.
Okay.
I really
all right. We'll do it. And maybe next time we'll have some of your music, too, because I didn't have anything.
I like that. Politics, I wouldn't mind talking about, and all that. Local and national life, I like all that stuff.
Yeah,
we didn't get to it,
so we didn't get all the list, but we'll do it again. So, okay, we're going to go back to The World in Song and let John go. Take care.
Well, no one could have planned it, 'cause no one understands. It just comes rushing in.